The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Jesus said to the Pharisees, "There was a rich man who dressed in purple garments and fine linen, and dined sumptuously each day. And lying at his door was a poor man named Lazarus, covered with sores, who would gladly have eaten his fill of the scraps that fell from the rich man's table. Dogs even used to come and lick his sores. When the poor man died, he was carried away by angels to the bosom of Abraham. The rich man also died and was buried. And from the netherworld, where he was in torment, he raised his eyes and saw Abraham far off, and Lazarus at his side. And he cried out, 'Father Abraham, have pity on me. Send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am suffering torment in these flames.' Abraham replied, 'My child, remember that you received what was good during your lifetime, while Lazarus likewise received what was bad. But now he is comforted here, whereas you are tormented. Moreover, between us and you a great chasm is established to prevent anyone from crossing, who might wish to go from our side to yours, or from your side to ours.' He said, 'Then I beg you, Father, send him to my father's house, for I have 5 brothers, that he may warn them, lest they too come to the place of torment.' But Abraham replied, 'They have Moses and the prophets. Let them listen to them.' He said, 'Oh no, Father Abraham, but if someone from the dead goes to them, they will repent.' Then Abraham said, 'If they will not listen to Moses and the prophets, neither will they be persuaded if someone should rise from the dead.'" The Gospel of the Lord. Today's Gospel is a great reminder to us about how we are stewards with what we have and how we are stewards to the poor around us. One of the things I think is unique about this particular passage of the Gospel, I think it's interesting that Jesus goes out of his way to name the poor man, Lazarus, but he doesn't name the rich man. I think that has significance for us because I think sometimes in our modern culture we want to serve the poor as kind of an abstract idea. It's significant that Jesus goes out of his way to specifically name this person. It's good for us to remember as Catholics that it's not just good to serve the poor, but rather think about who is that specific person in our life. Who is the Lazarus in our life who we need to serve in a non-abstract way. This parable is also interesting because of all the parables of Jesus, this parable is unique in that one of the main characters is named. Most often when Jesus spoke in parables, he did not name the person in the parable. But in this parable, he names the person as Lazarus. Lazarus, obviously, there's another person in the Gospels named Lazarus. Mentioned in which Gospel? Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John? John. In the Gospel of John, Lazarus is the man who Jesus raises from the dead. And so there's an interesting question about this passage here in the Gospel of Luke. Is this perhaps the same Lazarus mentioned in the Gospel of John? There's no concrete church interpretation on this, but there are some church fathers who do say indeed that this poor man, Lazarus, is the same man mentioned in the Gospel of John, who Jesus raises from the dead. There's a few reasons for that. First of all, we know in the Gospel of John, when Jesus went to raise Lazarus from the dead, when he entered into the house and he heard about Lazarus and the people around him mourning, many English translations say that Jesus was deeply troubled and then he wept. But in Greek, it says that Jesus became greatly angered when he arrived at the scene and saw the people mourning. And so people read that passage and they say, well, why was Jesus angry? I mean, it makes sense for him to be sad, but why was he angry? And church fathers used to speculate that maybe he was angry because the reason Lazarus had died was because he was poor and had been neglected by the people in the city. Part of what goes into this as well is that we know this parable about the rich man and the poor man Lazarus. It says that Jesus was speaking to the Pharisees. Many church fathers speculated that the woman who anointed Jesus' feet at the supper and was criticized by Simon the Pharisee. Some people argue that this rich man in this parable of the poor man and the rich man was actually Simon the Pharisee, who Jesus criticized when he was critical of the poor woman coming in and washing his feet. So people speculate about this. And perhaps maybe the most striking aspect of this parable is how it ended. In the parable of the poor man, Lazarus, and the rich man, when Lazarus asked Abraham to send messengers to his family, Abraham replies, "If they will not listen to Moses and the prophets," which is what Jesus constantly accused the Pharisees of doing, not listening to the Moses and the prophets, Abraham said, "Neither will they be persuaded, even if someone should rise from the dead." Think about that. Think about how that was a foreshadowing, not only of Jesus' own resurrection, but also of the resurrection of Lazarus, mentioned in the Gospel of John. When Jesus rose Lazarus from the dead, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, who should have been listening to the Moses and the prophets, but were not, when Lazarus rose from the dead, they were all converted, and they began to worship Jesus. Actually, that's not what happened. The Pharisees and the Sadducees plotted against Jesus, and not only Jesus, but against Lazarus. They began plotting to execute both of them, thus fulfilling these words of Abraham here in the parable. If they will not even listen to Moses and the prophets, then neither will they be persuaded, even if someone should rise from the dead.